Is the sun not good for you? For decades, I and the quantum health space people have been saying, soak in every spectrum of sunlight you can get. But this conversation with Matt Maruca blew my mind and brought new science into the equation about the beneficial and the harmful effects of blue light. He is the founder of RaOptics, and so he talks about a new lens that he's developed. This is fascinating stuff. Check it out.
So Matt, I have been a fan of RaOptics for a long time because I love how these blue blockers block the right light information so that we actually get the right light information, right? But I've heard that you started like a new line of these and I don't understand. Daytime blue blockers I get, you're blocking the fluorescent lights and stuff like that. Nighttime definitely because you want to have more red light and the spectrum coming into your eyes and body. But what's this new thing you've come upon?
So a couple years ago, I approached the world's leading photobiology expert, Dr. Alexander Wunsch, because I'm interested in developing the future of lighting and light therapy, not just eyewear. And I said, how can we make our eyewear products even better? How can we create new innovative products based on the science of light? How can we create the best lights, the best light therapy products? And we have a lot in the pipeline now as far as general lighting and light therapy products, really cool stuff. But as far as eyewear, he suggested this idea which he called the perfect complement for blue light protection. So with blue light protection, the whole idea is, as you said, blocking out the disruptive, more harmful light in order to allow the body to function more optimally. So with daylight lenses, this is neutralizing all the overstimulation of these artificial lights in offices today and protecting the eyes from the physical damage caused by these light sources. With the sunset lenses in the evening, it's actually blocking all that light to allow the brain to release melatonin for optimal sleep and repair.
Yes, wait, let me interrupt you there for a second to say. I don't usually wear daytime ones and I can feel the difference right this second. Like I'm like, wow, everything's more muted, more like the sunlight, less like the artificial light. And I do wear my nighttime blue blockers religiously, so I get their purpose, but I feel like there's something else coming.
Yeah, well, so with BlueSync, the idea is during the day, the range of blue light that is bad or disruptive at night is actually really important. So at night, we want to block all of the blue light. There's blue light goes from around 400 to 500 nanometers approximately in the light spectrum. Below 450 nanometers, so halfway, the shorter wavelengths part, closer to UV light, can cause more physical damage to our eyes, also to our skin. And when we're in an office, typically people won't sit in the sun for 12 hours, but when you're in an office, you're under that light, and then you go home, you're under artificial light for 12 hours plus in a day. Most people are indoors 92% of their time, according to government data. So we're exposed to this short wavelength blue light, which is high energy and also has the power to cause damage to our retina, also to our skin, but our retina is very sensitive, it's fully exposed, the eye brings in all the light. So we want to block and protect from that shorter wavelength light, especially from long-term exposure. But that longer wavelength blue light above 450 nanometers is responsible for activating our hormonal system, specifically our circadian rhythm, the endocrine system, and so on, the production of hormones and neurotransmitters and everything. So what Dr. Wunsch proposed is, why don't we make a lens, and he had been already stewing on this idea for a couple of years before he presented it to me, just waiting for the right place to bring it out, that blocks the most harmful wavelengths of blue light during the day while transmitting the longer wavelengths of blue light that are necessary to stimulate our circadian rhythm and activate our circadian rhythm. So basically, BlueSync is designed for two purposes. One, you can use it indoors if you're indoors for many hours, and we recommend people always go outside every hour or two for 10 to 15 minutes to get natural daylight. But some people just can't, or they won't. So they can use BlueSync to selectively shift the light spectrum towards the circadian activating blue light wavelengths while blocking the most harmful. So it's basically transmitting the beneficial good blue light while blocking the more harmful bad blue light, to make it simple. Inside or outside or both? Both. So inside, it works in one way, shifting the spectrum of any light source towards basically, it increases the color temperature, which means, in other words, it's selectively shifting the spectrum towards blue light, but only the longer wavelength blue, which activates the rhythm, not the shorter wavelength blue, which causes physical damage, specifically reactive oxygen species production in the eye.
All right, I have a question. Why would nature have that shorter wavelength of blue if it wasn't beneficial for us?
This is a really great question. Well, it's hard to say exactly why nature has done anything. So I'm not quite equipped to guess on that. However, what I would say is that life's job is to adapt to the environment, right? And so simple-celled organisms like bacteria and archaea are killed by ultraviolet light, so this short wavelength light. It's phototoxic to them. It tears apart their cell membranes and basically makes it so they can't exist. So, UV light kills bacteria.
That's
why
right.
mold and these things don't grow in bright light. They grow in damp,
and other
dark
people
places.
use these UV
Yeah,
lights
exactly.
to
For
do
example,
that.
exactly. So, eukaryotic organisms, so complex life, so animals, plants, and so on, developed mechanisms to protect against UV light and to mitigate its risks so that we could function in the world full of ultraviolet light. But the key word is protect. So it isn't that UV light is this amazing thing that is essential for us. Although, having studied the science of light,
Yes.
I know that UV light is really important for health.
Yes.
It is beneficial for health, but in moderation, in reasonable doses. So the heliotherapists, the doctors from Switzerland in the last century who used sunlight to treat diseases, they were very meticulous and diligent about the sunlight exposure. They would literally roll the patients into the sun, starting with their feet for 5 minutes a day. The next day they do the feet for 5 minutes, then the lower leg for 5 minutes. So it was 10 on the feet and 5 on the lower leg. And they'd continue up their body as long as their body didn't reject the light till their body was fully acclimated to the sun. So very meticulous, diligent exposure to sunlight can be used to treat a variety of health conditions, and it's very important. But what we've had biohackers and health and wellness people, including myself, who is misinformed, go out and basically tell people more sunlight is better,
Yes.
get as much as you can, you can't really overdo it, even if you burn, it's not that big of a deal, it's not going to cause issues, which just really isn't true. So there's a lot more nuance. So in everything, Dr. Wunsch explained to me, there's the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis somewhere in the middle. And the thesis is the World Health Organization saying, right now, UV light is carcinogenic and causes cancer and causes problems. And so this is the global mainstream perspective.
Yeah.
Now, the antithesis is, no, sunlight is amazing, get as much as you can,
Bring
UV
it
light's
on.
never bad. The synthesis is somewhere in the middle. Like, sunlight is essential for healing and benefits, but excessive sunlight and unmanaged sunlight exposure is really not an intelligent idea based on the evidence available. So basically, to answer your question in a different way, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the gist of it. So
Yeah.
we adapted to UV light to protect from it and to be able to use it in certain beneficial ways,
Sure.
but that doesn't mean more is always better. For example, now, another great example is we evolved like primates in trees, covered in what? A green canopy,
yes.
which is full of chlorophyll. And what chlorophyll does, when I test on my spectrometer, I went outside yesterday and pointed the spectrometer, turned towards the asphalt. And what I see when I turn towards the asphalt is a huge amount of short wavelength light, UVA, UVB, blue light, and a pretty significant amount of red and near infrared light, the longer wavelengths, more regenerative wavelengths as well. But the balance was shifted more towards the shorter wavelengths, the more damaging, deleterious wavelengths. Now, as soon as I turn 180 degrees, same standing position, towards the canopy, the green, the grass, the visible light, the visible part of the spectrum in the short wavelengths were reduced approximately 70%. The near infrared stayed exactly the same. In other words, the chlorophyll spectrum we evolved in naturally shifted the balance of light towards the healing regenerative wavelengths and away from the more deleterious wavelengths. And so people hear about forest bathing, going out and being in the forest.
Yes.
What forest bathing really is bathing in near infrared light and green, which is very balancing light for our nervous system. So the point is, BlueSync works on the exact same principle as the natural chlorophyll spectrum. Everybody knows you go to a beach, you're on a gravelly area or on snow or sand or water. The light's uncomfortable, it's intense.
Yes.
Why? Because a lot of UV is being reflected while near infrared, the beneficial part is being absorbed. And so we're not getting that back. Same in any city. The city is an unnatural environment. You have asphalt, you have concrete,
Yes.
you have glass skyscrapers, and you have metal everywhere, reflecting back the more damaging short wavelengths, absorbing the healing good near infrared, the opposite of what chlorophyll does. So BlueSync acts on the same principle as the chlorophyll spectrum. It shifts the balance of light towards the healing regenerative red and near infrared wavelengths while cutting out specifically the short wavelength more damaging UVA, UVB, and HEVL, which is high energy visible light.
Right.
While the only difference from the chlorophyll spectrum is it's shifting the visible portion instead of to green exactly to the range of circadian activating, we'll call it good blue light, during the day to give us that activating effect, whereas green is more balancing.
Oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. I can't help but think that we don't live in the same situation that our ancestors did, right?
It's true.
So we're, like you're right, in man-made homes and cities and places that are not conducive to embracing the healing light. We're not in the same place that they were. So we have to adapt. And so maybe that's exactly what these BlueSync glasses are going to do. They're going to help us take in the light as we were meant to take it in.
Absolutely right. Exactly. So for example, people who live in the desert, like the Bedouins in the
Yes.
Middle East, they would cover themselves from head to toe with a tiny slit.
They would.
Because they know that the light can be damaging. You know,
Yes.
they would wear black instead of white. You think black would be hotter. Well, the thing is, if you wear white, you blind each other. When you're in a group, all the reflection is blinding, so they wear black. The way their outfits were created causes airflow from the bottom up. So it actually allow air to flow through. It's loose and loose fitting.
Yeah.
So they knew all this stuff. For example, the Inuits created goggles made of
seen those.
bone with
Yes.
slits to protect from snow blindness.
Because it was
right?
too bright out there when they're out seal hunting or
Because
whatnot.
UVA, UVB, and short wavelength blue light causes physical damage to the eyes in excess. Now, moderate amounts, right? We still recommend people go outside in the morning. Like, what do I do personally? I go outside and watch the sunrise
Same.
regularly and
Yes.
get that morning light without blue sync, without anything. I want that natural, unfiltered daylight to
Yes.
activate my circadian rhythm.
Yes.
As the day goes on, I'll try to get myself exposed to natural, unfiltered light throughout the day. But first of all, when I want a bit of an extra kick, so I want to condition the light spectrum to give me more of a circadian effect, I want to focus, I put on blue sync and I really feel a significant effect. Now the other thing is when the sun is very strong, like it is here in Austin, Texas,
very
in the
strong.
end of April or whatever time of the month
Yeah,
it is,
yeah,
it's getting really strong, it's really hot. It's unpleasant for me, and when I put on blue sync, I feel a huge amount of refreshment. Now blue sync, it's interesting, it isn't a sunglass, people are comparing it to sunglasses.
Yes.
It's a new category of lens, it's circadian activating eyewear for daytime, in other words, the world's first performance enhancing eyewear. But what blue sync does is all the things I've just mentioned, and it does everything sunglasses do but better. So sunglasses block UVA and UVB light.
They do.
Okay, that can be okay. They also diminish the visible light spectrum, so they make it darker. Well, what happens when you make it darker is the pupil opens wider. And so the eye actually brings in more light. And because sunglasses don't block this other range of concerning light, HEVL, high energy visible light, you're actually getting potentially a higher dose of damaging short wavelength blue light when you wear traditional sunglasses
Interesting.
compared to not wearing them at all. So this is
Yeah.
one concern. The other issue of sunglasses is that they blunt the circadian impact of daylight. So in other words, you want the circadian stimulus of daylight. You want to be wakened
Yes.
up. You want to be energized. Sunglasses can make people more tired, less energized, less focused because they're reducing the overall light intensity just kind of haphazardly without clear selection and delineation. So what blue sync does is completely different. It blocks not just UVA and UVB, but also HEVL. And HEVL, high energy visible light, is the part of the light spectrum that's responsible for glare in the eye, because this is visible light which actually scatters as it goes through the different layers of the eye, and it causes this kind of glare effect in the eye. So when people put on blue sync, one of the first things they comment is that everything feels sharper because it's blocking the short wavelength blue light, which causes basically glare within the eye tissue. So the other thing,
Yeah, go ahead.
it not only blocks all the bad light, but it unlike regular sunglasses, which just blunt the whole visible spectrum, it transmits the blue that activates the circadian rhythm during the day, while then reducing all the rest of the visible light. So you still get that light reduction and kind of protection effect and cooling. It's shifting the balance of visible light towards circadian activation. And finally, just like chlorophyll, transmitting all of those healing and regenerative deep red and near infrared light wavelengths.
So I have a question, because some people say when you wear sunglasses, it makes it more likely for you to burn because your brain isn't getting the information, the right light information about what time of day it is. Does blue sync, is it going to have the same effect?
So this is a very great point. I've believed that and shared that information for years, but I'm not 100% convinced about this. Now, it's a great question. Having worked with Dr. Wunsch and asked him this question numerous times, his perspective is that the science on that is not quite as strong yet as it should be. However, personally, I'm inclined to believe that yes, this can be an issue. So this is why I still recommend people go outside and get exposure to unfiltered light. Like, we don't generally recommend to wear blue sync continuously all the time, but here's the thing. If I can kind of have people, if I could have everybody follow exactly my recommendations and Dr. Wunsch's recommendations actually, it would be don't use sunglasses as a way to allow yourself to stay in the sun longer than you should. Like, don't use them when you're sitting and you're too hot and like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna stay in the sun longer because now I took the stress off of my eyes. No, if your eyes are feeling stressed, that the light's too intense, you should go into the shade. You shouldn't use blue sync or any sunglasses to reduce the stressful effect of the light only to stay in the sun longer. That's problematic. That could be an issue. So if you're going to sit in the sun and sunbathe, don't wear sunglasses to make it so that you can stay longer. Be meticulous and diligent about the amount of time. So again, like what I'll do is I'll use BlueSync for 20, 30 minutes in the morning, and then maybe throw it on again a little bit later in the day. If I'm, for example, again, in bright sunlight, like 'cause I'm walking somewhere where it's really intense and I feel this discomfort, I'm gonna put on BlueSync. I'm always gonna use physical protection like a hat as well.
Do too.
Because this is, people have, culturally, actually, we forget about this, but 100 years ago, for example, I don't know exactly about women, but for a man, you weren't considered dressed if you left the house without a hat on.
Back in the 60s and whatnot.
A large part of that, and even earlier 1900s and so on, like a large part of that was sun protection. And also even gloves, because the hands actually get exposure to sun and age over time. So again, I'm not saying to people, it's critical to note that you shouldn't get any sun. We reject the unscientific claim from the World Health Organization that UV light is carcinogenic and always bad. But we also reject the unscientific extrapolations of some research saying that UV light's never bad and you can basically get as much as you want and burning's never a problem. Because this is also really not scientific. And unfortunately, Dr. Wunsch, who I work with, different individuals in the health and wellness biohacking world have taken his work and actually misinterpreted and misconstrued it and taken it and run with it like, oh, more sun is always better. And that's not really, in fact, the case.
Yeah, that's what I always thought too, but I've traveled the world, as you know, and in Ethiopia, for example, the people know to get inside when it's the hottest part of the day. They'll be out there some, but they'll take natural shade.
Exactly.
So we think, oh, they're exposed all the time. No, they're not. They're being very judicious
Animals
about it.
do the same.
Yep.
They don't stay in the sun longer than they need to.
Right.
They go and hunt and do their things. They're not going to just chill in the sun. Maybe they take a sun bath because they're cold and they want to warm up. Probably not too cold in Ethiopia anyway. Right. But for example, like in Spain and Italy, they take a siesta.
They do.
They go and chill out at the strongest sun, hottest hours of the day. And that's how they do it.
Absolutely. All right, I have two more questions as we wrap up. One is, what kind of waves come from our devices? You were talking about the damaging shortwave blue light. Is that what we're getting from our devices?
So the devices, unfortunately, the blue light peak from LED devices is kind of right in the middle of the short wavelength blue light, which causes physical damage to the eyes, and the range which causes hormonal stimulation. So during the day, some of the blue light for hormonal stimulation can be okay, but the issue is that it's usually so out of proportion relative to natural sunlight, and then these screens are devoid of that regenerative red and near infrared light, which is the part that kind of balances out the spectrum in daylight and in chlorophyll-rich environments like the canopy, green, the grass. Even when I did the measurements outside, even not in the shade under the canopy, even just pointing towards the green grass in the sun, the spectrum was still basically the same as under the canopy, just because of how much the chlorophyll in the grass is altering the spectrum, because it's living chlorophyll absorbing all of that light.
I never think of this.
I never
did
myself.
Of it. That's
it's
so cool
really
that you got
fascinating.
to work with
And
Dr. Wunsch on this.
This is the amazing stuff. So from a screen, on the other hand, you're not getting any of the healing red and near infrared, nor from any modern indoor light sources, unfortunately, today. We're working on fixing that, I assure you.
Oh, good.
Diligently and carefully and as quickly as we can. But so the screen's emitting this blue light, which isn't really ideal. So we recommend, for example, I use the night shift mode on the phone, which reduces a huge amount of the blue light. I'll use my daylight lenses, for example, if I'm in any environment with this artificial light that I can't just put a software on top of, like a mall or the airports I'm constantly traveling in, or even on the plane, because in the air there's so much. You're high up, there's so much strong radiation coming through the window, or I just close the window sometimes. So I'll use the glasses at big box stores, I'll use them at conference centers like this. And so the best way to think about it is that BlueSync is a lens which selectively enhances the light spectrum for specific benefits. And that's our energizing lens, particularly for morning use, to activate and strengthen the circadian rhythm. Daylight is a blue light protection lens, so rather than a blue light enhancement, let's call it, which is designed for maximal protection during the day, the ones that you're wearing now. Maximal protection during the day to basically neutralize the hormonal overstimulation of artificial lights and protect the eye from physical damage. And then additionally, what daylight lenses do is they are creating like a balancing effect. So basically, BlueSync is energizing. Daylight is more balancing, designed for use in an artificial light environment throughout the day for extended periods. And our sunset lenses are designed for evening use 2 to 3 hours before sleep in order to allow the brain to register that the sun has set, getting rid of all of the melanopsin activating wavelengths. In other words, the wavelengths of light that activate the circadian rhythm through the sensitive cells in the eye that scientists have recently discovered. And blocking all that light so the brain says, oh, it's actually night. Okay, I want to start releasing melatonin to regenerate. The most important thing for health from a circadian rhythm perspective is maximizing the amplitude of the daytime phase of the circadian stimulus with daylight And for example, something like BlueSync can help to enhance that if you have a limited amount of time to be outside, for example, and maximizing the amplitude of the night phase, the darkness in the evening, which is something the sunset lenses do by blocking all the artificial light, which otherwise tricks the brain into thinking it's still day.
My last question, what do you say to people who think you're crazy? They're like, oh no, Matt, like I wear sunglasses, I don't need glasses inside. They're just like, all this stuff is a little too deep for me.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, it's funny, lately the people who think I'm crazy are actually the people I used to really like agree with about everything. And they're like, oh, you're blocking UV light now, you're crazy, you know, you went off the deep end. But what I would say to that is, unfortunately, there's a lot of groupthink in the world today where people just take an idea, they don't think for themselves, and they just believe everything they're told. People are inclined to go from one extreme to the next, but not to look for the synthesis. And having worked with Wunsch, it took him like 2 years plus to start to show me the kind of, I would say, incorrectness of a lot of the things I believe for a long time. And as far as people who are just wearing sunglasses, I mean, the best thing to say is like, it's a great question, I'm stumped, I got this. For anybody who's wearing sunglasses and doesn't want, I would just say, well, your sunglasses don't block HEVL, so they're neglecting a really critical part of the damaging light spectrum, which is damaging your eyes and even causing glare and reducing your visual experience. And you're blunting your circadian stimulus, your circadian impact when you're wearing regular sunglasses outside with regular sunglasses, so you're harming the daytime part of your circadian rhythm, amplifying that, which there's an 83 or 82,000 person study out of Australia, the largest study ever done on the impacts of light on health. And basically what they found is that it was specifically addressing and looking at psychiatric disorders from anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, etc. The groups that had the highest amount of psychiatric disorders were those that had less bright light during the day and more light at night. So in other words, they reduced the amplitude of the day and the night phases of their circadian rhythm. And the effects are independent and additive. In other words, the groups that got less daylight during the day, but even the same darkness at night, had still worse results than those who had both maximum light during the day and maximum darkness at night. So basically, the takeaway is we need light during the day to activate and strengthen our rhythm, and we need to block light at night or just use candles or something like this, or healthy, high quality lighting, which we're working on, in order to have optimal circadian health, which means optimal overall health. So somebody who's just wearing sunglasses, unfortunately, the optical industry is just not looking at that. And that's where all of a sudden, unexpectedly, we've started to gain a lot of traction because we're innovating where it matters. We're innovating on lens technology where the rest of the optical industry is just like, oh, whose frame is the coolest, whose style is the coolest, who has the best fashion. And it's like not focusing on the reason a frame exists is to hold a lens.
Yes.
So they're focusing on the superficial part and not the real core.
That's what I was thinking, superficial. Well, I'm all about the real, and in case you didn't hear it, we want more natural light during the day, less artificial at night, right?
Absolutely.
That's one of the key. Get these amazing frames, either the daytime ones, the BlueSync, or the nighttime blue blockers for optimal health. I'm so thankful for everything that you're doing, Matt.
Thank you, Hilda.
If you liked this conversation with Matt and found it very thought-provoking like I did, please share it and like and subscribe to this channel so I can bring you more content that you'll love. Take care. Hasta pronto.